How much does it cost to feed 6 people out of one pot? There is a pot on my stove that has never had a lid to match it. Cast iron, 10 inches across, bought at a farm sale outside Millersburg, Ohio in 1971 for $2. I put a dinner plate over the top of it, and I have gone on doing that for 55 years. Somebody sent me a list last month, 25 one-pot suppers off the open range out of a chuck wagon over a fire. I expected a history lesson about Texas and Montana. I counted 18 I have made in this kitchen. My name is Ruth Mae Callahan. I am 74, and it appears I have been cooking cowboy food since about 1958. But let me be straight with you before we start, because most of these are not cowboy food at all. They are poor food. Not one item here was invented by a man on a horse. They were broke, 300 miles from a store, carrying everything they owned on one wagon, which is a set of conditions my grandmother would have recognized without looking up from her own stove in 1932. Take away the hats, and what is left is somebody feeding a houseful out of one pan. It has always been the same problem. So before we begin, do one thing for me that costs you nothing. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Ohio, Texas, West Virginia. It makes no difference to me, and I read every one of them. I like knowing whose kitchen this is going into. Counting down from 25. Number 25, ash cake. This one has no pot at all, which is a strange way to start, but it is where the whole thing begins. Meal, water, salt, worked into a stiff paste and flattened between your palms. You damp some corn husks, fold the cake up inside them, and push the parcel under the hot edge of a fire. Half an hour, and you scrape the gray off and eat it standing up. Meal was 2 cents a pound in 1870. It is $1.20 at my store this week. My mother baked hers in the coal grate on wash day because the stovetop was full of water. Number 24, mush. 1 measure of coarse meal to 3 of water, salt, and you stand over it stirring until your shoulder starts complaining. 20 minutes at a lazy bubble. 4 people fed for about 3 cents in 1875 and about 40 cents today. My father dug a well in the middle of his bowl and dropped a spoon of bacon grease in to melt down through it. I ate that every winter morning of my childhood. But I never once thought of it as poor. I thought of it as hot. The difference between those two is mostly whether anybody has told you yet. Number 23, fried mush, which is the same pot again. Whatever is left goes into a loaf tin and out onto the cold porch overnight. By morning it has set firm enough to cut in slabs, into the skillet with whatever fat is going, and you leave it be until the edges turn dark and brittle. 2 suppers out of 1 boiling, and still only 1 thing to wash. Why would anybody improve on that? A trail cook did it because he was hauling the pot across the territory on a wagon. I do it because I am 74, and there is one of me. Number 22. Sowbelly and greens. Belly pork, salted down until it is more salt than meat. Keeps for months with no ice. Take a 1/4 pound small dice and let it go slow until the fat runs out and the bits go golden. Then in goes whatever is growing near the creek. Lamb's quarter, dandelion, mustard weed, free. Belly pork was 10 cents a pound then and $6.50 now. But look at the dandelion. What they pulled out of a ditch for nothing sits in a farmer's market in Kansas at $12 a pound. I find that funnier than I probably ought to. Number 21, Potlikker, not a recipe. It is the dark salty inch left in the bottom once the greens are lifted out, and it is the most valuable thing in the pot. A scoop of beans goes in, enough meal to thicken it, and the whole business sits at the back of the fire all afternoon, so every pot ends up tasting faintly of the pot before. Beans were 4 cents a pound then, $1.80 now. My grandmother would not let a living soul near the sink while that liquid was still in the pan. There was cornbread for it, and you were expected to use the cornbread. Number 20, sourdough biscuits. The starter traveled in a crock roped to the wagon, and the cook minded it the way other men minded their ammunition. Why? Because it was not one meal, it was every meal. No starter, no biscuits, no flapjacks, no cake, and 12 hungry men wanting an explanation before dark. Flour was 3 cents a pound in 1875 and runs 80 cents now. A sourdough loaf in a bakery in Columbus will take $9 off you, which back then bought a 100-weight sack and gave you change. Number 19, camp flapjacks. That same starter, let down thin with more flour and water before first light, dropped onto a skillet, wiped with a rind of the belly pork. A man put away 4 or 5 on his feet, and then sat a horse for 12 hours. Molasses over them, and molasses was 50 cents a gallon. A jug that size is near $30 today, the biggest single jump on the whole list. Nobody thinks of molasses as expensive. It went expensive quietly while we were all busy watching the price of beef. Number 18, onion and potato hash. Spuds were the one fresh thing that would survive a drive, and they went in the pan cut rough with fat and whatever onions came up along the creek, then left alone until the undersides blistered. 60 cents a bushel in 1880, call it a cent a pound, call it $1.10 today. Salt, pepper, nothing else, but the hard part is doing nothing, and almost nobody can. My husband stirred his every 2 minutes for 40 years and never once produced a brown edge on anything. Number 17, molasses and biscuits. End of a day, the cook put a tray of bread and the syrup tin out on the tailgate, and men poured it on and ate upright, still filthy off the herd. On the days there was nothing else in the wagon, that was supper, under 2 cents a man. 2 biscuits and a spoonful today comes to maybe 50 cents. It is still the cheapest sweet thing you can set in front of a person. Number 16, hardtack skillet. Hardtack is flour and water and salt, baked well past the point of sense, and it keeps for years, which is why the army sold crates of it off cheap after the war. Straight out of the box, it is a threat to your teeth, but break it up in a pan with fat and a little water until it goes soft, then press it flat and fry it dark on each face, and you have a supper. There is no shelf price now because nobody sells it. That is what happens to a food when the reason for it goes away. Number 15, Dutch oven bread, coals underneath, coals heaped on the lid, and a campfire is an oven. The dough was set to rise in the shadow of the wagon while the outfit was out riding, and an hour in the pot put fresh bread in the middle of Wyoming. I have my mother's Dutch oven, bought second-hand in 1949, and I have never needed another. Cast iron does not wear out. It only changes hands. Number 14, dried apple stack cake. Sugar came in a sealed tin and was doled out like something from a chemist, but dried apples were cheap at any supply town, about 10 cents a pound. You soften them, crush them down with spice, if there is spice, and build them in layers with thin sourdough rounds, 5 or 6 stories high. Wrap the tower in a cloth overnight, and by morning it cuts clean. Dried apples are near $9 a pound now. This is the one men went quiet over. Number 13, vinegar pie. No lemons, no cream, nothing fresh inside 3 weeks in any direction. So sugar, flour, water, and a hard slug of cider vinegar go in a pan together until the whole thing turns thick and shines, and that gets poured into a baked crust and left to set. But it tastes of lemon. It has no business tasting of lemon. Vinegar was 25 cents a gallon and is $4 now, one of the very few things here that got cheaper against a week's wages. My aunt in Indiana called it desperation pie, and she was not being modest. If you are getting something out of this, press subscribe. I put one of these out every week, and the ones that help are usually the ones that turn up the week you happen to need them, which I cannot arrange unless you are actually here. And if you have only just landed, I am Ruth. This is my kitchen, and we are halfway down a list of 25. Number 12, stale biscuit pudding. Sourdough goes hard inside a day, so nothing ever left that wagon as waste. The old bread gets torn up into the oven, then wet down with water and tinned milk if there is any, sugar if any survived. Coals on the lid, 40 minutes. Tinned milk was 20 cents a can in 1880 and counted as a luxury, but it is $3 now, and nobody counts it at all. I make this whenever the bread beats me, which at my age is most weeks. Number 11, spotted pup. Rice, cooked long and slow, sweetened with whatever there is, and raisins through it that come up dark on the surface like the markings on a dog. Rice was 8 cents a pound then, and $1.20 now. Raisins were 12 cents, today around $4. But the rice was never the point. A pot of this on a Saturday night told 12 exhausted men that somebody had noticed they were people. The cooks who bothered kept their jobs. That is not sentiment. That is a fact about employment. Number 10, salt pork and beans, the foundation of the whole thing, and it is in every diary anybody kept out there. Beans go in cold water overnight. Next morning, the pork is rendered down until the fat runs clear. The beans go in on top, water 2 inches over, and the pot is shut and set in the coals for 6 or 8 hours while the world gets on with its business. 4 cents a pound for the beans, 10 for the pork. Today, $1.80 and $6.50, but the number that matters is the last one. 6 people fed for under $4. Number 9, trailed chili, and there are no beans in it. Why not? Because beans were a separate 8-hour job and the only pot they had. It is not an opinion about Texas, it is arithmetic. Chili was dried chilies soaked soft and worked down by hand. Meat and small pieces browned hard in tallow. Water, 2 hours low. The chilies cost a few cents a handful and are $16 a pound now. Ground powder came later, and it is not the same article. Whole dried peppers in time. Number 8. Jackrabbit stew, free if you could shoot one, and the cartridge came to about 2 cents. Lean and tough, so a poor cook turned out something dry and stringy, and a good one knew to color the pieces in fat first. Then water, dried onion, salt, pepper, lid on, 2 hours down in the coals until it gives up and falls off the bone. 1 rabbit went round 6 men. But rabbit at a butcher today is $14 a pound, which would have bought the rifle. That reversal turns up more than once here. Number 7, pemmican stew, and this one they learned rather than invented. Dried meat beaten to a powder, bound with fat and dried berries, pressed into a slab that keeps for years, with no cellar and no ice. On its own, it is a brick. But drop it into water on the boil with a handful of dried corn and a turnip, and it becomes something that will carry a man through weather that would stop most people. The fat costs nothing at butchering. The keeping costs nothing. It is the only thing here that solved the refrigeration problem before there was a refrigerator. Number 6, Prairie oysters. On branding days, the calves were cut, and what came off went into the skillet, split, rolled in meal, and fried until the outsides crisped. Free, obviously. Branding day was the best eating of the whole drive for that reason alone. Men who turned their nose up the first year were asking for them by the third. But I will not pretend I was raised on these. I was raised on the liver and the heart. And I still keep a jar of bacon grease at the back of this stove that my daughter throws out every single time she visits. Number 5, son of a gun stew, which is the polite version of the name. When a calf was butchered, nothing went in the ground, so everything on the inside of it was cut fine and stewed down with onion and chili. The piece they fought over was the marrow gut, out of a calf still on the milk, which melts away and gives the pot a depth that plain muscle will never give you. Beef heart is $4 a pound today. Sweetbread's $18. The trail boss ate his out of the same pan as the youngest hand on the outfit, because everybody wanted the ladle to go deep. Number 4, Burgoo. It began in Kentucky as a hunting stew, went through the war in mess halls where whatever was left over went in, and reached the cattle trails in the 1870s as the answer to a very particular problem. What do you do on the day before the supply town? Everything goes in. The beans nobody finished, the last knuckle of pork, onions, meal to thicken, a rabbit if one turned up that morning. There is no recipe, and there never was one. A woman wrote under a video like this one to say she was making it that weekend out of goat, rabbit, and ground pork. And she is entirely correct too. Number 3, Mulligan stew, which is Burgoo with less pride. Whatever could be found, shot, gathered, or swapped, for went in the pot, and no questions were asked about any of it. Trail hands between jobs lived on this, and 40 years on, so did men riding the freight trains through Arkansas in the Depression. A couple of rabbit legs, some beans, 3 spuds, and a piece of pork bone will get 4 men to morning in the cold, for what would come to about $3 today. There was one rule only, everything in and nothing too small to be worth the bother. Number 2, Cowboy coffee, and here is where I correct the record, because the version going round is wrong. Coarse grounds by the fistful, cold water on top, straight onto the fire and boiled. Now, you will be told the trick is a splash of cold water to settle the grounds. That is not the trick. The trick is an egg, shell and all, cracked in and stirred through, and the white gathers every last grain and takes them to the bottom in a raft you can lift straight out. Roasted coffee was 25 cents a pound then, and about $9 now. Number 1, son of a gun in a sack, and the true name of it did not get printed in a newspaper until well into the last century. Beef suet, flour, dried fruit, syrup, and whatever spice was left, all worked together, then knotted up tight in a cloth and dropped in water on a rolling boil for 3 hours. What comes out is dense and dark, sweet and savory at the same moment, and it wants no oven whatsoever, only a pot and patience. The suet was free. It came out at the finish of a drive, and at Christmas in a camp full of men 1,000 miles from anybody who knew their first name. That is the 25. 18 of them have come out of this kitchen, most long before I had any idea where they came from. But here is what I think the list is really about, and it is not Cowboys at all. Somebody left a comment under a video like this one that said, I make a lot of one-pot meals, 1 dish to wash. That is it. That is the whole thing. A chuck wagon cook worked in one pot because he was hauling it across Texas on a wagon. My grandmother worked in one pot because there was 1 stove and 11 people in the house. I work in one pot because it is 6:15. There is one of me, and I am not standing at that sink twice in an evening. Same pot. 3 reasons, not one of them has a thing to do with romance, and every one of them has to do with somebody being tired. I have written all 25 out properly, with the price and the year it was cooked, and today's price alongside it, in the collection linked below this video. Now tell me the one your family actually made, not the one you have read about. The one that was on your table, and what your people called it, because every county had a different name for the same pan, and I collect them. I read every single one. Next week, I am doing the Depression suppers that came out of this same arithmetic 40 years later, and I will open with whichever of yours I cannot stop thinking about. That pot I bought outside Millersburg for $2 is on the stove behind me with a dinner plate over the top of it, the way it has been every day since. I am Ruth Mae Callahan, and there is always something in it.